My name is Thomas Thatcher. I'm 58 years old, and my daughter called to ask me not to come to her own wedding. She said I'd embarrass her rich in-laws. So I stayed home, while the groom's family had no idea who they'd just pushed aside. I held the phone a long time after she hung up. My hands are rough. I've built things my whole life. I never thought those hands would make my own child ashamed. Before we begin, take a moment to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. It means more than you know. There's a reason the groom's father went pale when he saw my name on a list. There's a reason I didn't fight. You'll understand both before the end. Now, let me take you back to last autumn, the day the wedding envelope landed in my hands. The envelope was heavy, cream-colored, with gold along the edge. I sat at the kitchen table and opened it slow. Emily's name was printed beside a man named Daniel Smith. My girl was getting married. I laughed out loud in the empty house. I called my sister Maggie that night and read the whole card to her twice. I already knew the suit I'd wear, charcoal gray, the one I bought for her nursing graduation. 3 days later, Emily called. Her voice was wrong from the first word. "Dad," she said, "I need to talk to you about the wedding." "I've got the date circled," I told her. "I'm counting down." She went quiet. I heard her breathing. "It's complicated," she said. "Daniel's family is a certain kind of people." "What kind?" "The kind who notice things." She stopped. "Dad, I think maybe it's better if you don't come." I set my coffee down. I didn't say anything for a moment. "You don't have to explain," I said finally. "I just need to know one thing. Is this what you want, or what someone wants for you?" She didn't answer. That silence told me more than any words could. "Emily," I said, "talk to me. Daniel's mother thinks—" She caught herself. "She's worried that you'd—" The line crackled. Somewhere on her end, a door closed. "That I'd what?" I asked. "I have to go, Dad. I'll call you back." She didn't call back that night. I sat at the table until the coffee went cold, the gold-edged card still open in front of me. I read Daniel Smith's name again and wondered what kind of family taught a son to be ashamed of where his bride came from. Emily came by the house 2 days later. She stood in my kitchen and couldn't look at me. "I owe you the truth," she said. I poured her coffee the way she likes it. I waited. "Daniel's parents are wealthy," she said. "Really wealthy. The Smiths. They own property all over the state." I gathered that from the envelope. "They're hosting the wedding, paying for everything. It's at a country club." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "His mother, Vivien, she's very concerned about appearances. Who's there, how it looks. And I don't look right." Emily's eyes filled. "She said her guests aren't used to people like you. She said your work, your hands, the truck." She stopped. "She said you'd make me look small in front of them." I looked down at my hands. 40 years of concrete and steel had written themselves into the cracks of my knuckles. I'd never once been ashamed of them. "And you believed her," I said. "Not cruel, just true." "No." Emily's voice broke. "I don't know. I'm scared, Dad. They run everything in Daniel's world. If I start off on their bad side—" "You called your own father an embarrassment because a woman you barely know told you to." She started to cry then. I hate myself for asking, but I asked. I came around the table and stood beside her. I didn't put my arm around her. Not yet. "I need you to hear me," I said. "I am not ashamed of one single day of the work that raised you." "I know, Dad." "Then why does she?" Emily wiped her face. "Because she's never had to build anything in her life." That was the first true thing either of us had said, and it wouldn't be the last. After Emily left, I drove out to the river. I do that when I need to think. The Halloran Bridge crosses the water at the north end of town. 4 lanes, steel and concrete, 200 feet of span. Folks use it every day without a second thought. That's how you know it's good. A bridge you never have to think about is a bridge built right. I designed it. I built it. 22 years ago, when the old crossing failed inspection, the county couldn't afford the big firms. They came to me. Thatcher Structural. Just me and a crew of 11 back then. I sat in my truck at the overlook and watched the cars go by. Emily knew I built things. She'd watched me leave for the bridge job when she was 5, come home filthy and tired for 2 years straight. But she was a child then. To a child, a father is just Dad, the man who fixes the sink and smells like sawdust. She never grasped what the bridge meant. that engineers from 3 states call my office for advice, that the county won't approve a major structure without a name like mine on the report. I never spelled it out for her. It didn't seem like the kind of thing a father brags about to his kid. You don't earn respect by announcing it. You earn it by the thing standing there, holding weight, year after year. So to Emily, the bridge was just something Dad did once, long ago, before she was old enough to understand. Vivien Smith looked at my truck and my hands and saw a laborer. She wasn't entirely wrong. I am a laborer. I just happen to be the laborer her family's world quietly depends on, though none of us knew that yet. I started the engine and drove home, past the bridge I'd given this town. I had no idea that within a few weeks the name Smith would land on my desk, and everything would turn. My wife's name was Carol. She died when Emily was 12. Cancer. The kind that doesn't give you time to bargain. One spring she was planting tomatoes. By autumn she was gone. I held her hand in that hospital room and promised I'd raise our girl right. I didn't know how. I knew steel and concrete, load and tension. I didn't know how to braid hair or talk to a crying 12-year-old. I learned. Badly at first, then better. I went to every recital straight off the job site, the only dad in work boots in a room full of suits. Emily would find me after, embarrassed by the dust. I'd tell her, "Honey, this dust paid for those dance shoes." She'd roll her eyes, but she'd hold my hand to the truck. I never remarried. I'd had the real thing. I wasn't going to settle for less, so I poured everything into 2 things, Emily and the work. She became a nurse. She holds dying people's hands now, the way I held her mother's. I think that came from somewhere. So when Vivien Smith decided I was an embarrassment, she wasn't just insulting a man with rough hands. She was insulting the promise I'd kept for 15 years. But here's what I keep circling back to. The same week Emily asked me to disappear, a letter was already sitting unopened on my desk. A county letter. If I'd opened it that day, I'd have known everything before the rehearsal dinner. I'd have known while Vivien was telling her friends I couldn't be trusted in polite company. I let it sit, and the name inside it waited. My sister Maggie found out on a Sunday. She came over for dinner like she does, and she could read my face before I said a word. "What happened?" she said, not a question. I told her, all of it. Vivien, the country club, Emily asking me to stay home. Maggie put down her fork. She's 60, 2 years older than me, and she's never backed down from anything in her life. "You're going to that wedding," she said. "No, I'm not." "Thomas," she leaned forward, "that woman is bullying your daughter into erasing you, and you're going to let her." "I'm not letting anybody do anything." "You're staying home. That's letting her win." I got up and refilled her water glass. My hands were steady. They usually are. "Maggie, listen to me. If I show up where I'm not wanted, I turn Emily's wedding into a fight. Every eye in the room on the man in the gray suit, on his daughter looking sick. So you just disappear. I make myself easy to leave out. For her sake, not theirs. That's not strength, Tom. That's surrender." I sat back down across from her. "It's neither. It's love. I won't make my girl choose between her father and her peace, not on her wedding day." Maggie's jaw worked. She wanted to argue, but she's known me 60 years, and she knows when I've decided a thing. "They're going to regret this," she said quietly. "People like that always think the quiet ones are weak." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm not staying home to teach them a lesson. I'm staying home for Emily." What neither of us said out loud was the thing already moving toward us. A name, a project, a desk. A week later, I was at the diner on Main when I overheard 2 county men in the next booth. "Smith Group's still stuck," one said. "Whole development's frozen." I wasn't listening on purpose. You hear things in a small town. "What's the holdup?" "Structural sign-off. The Riverside Towers. County won't move without an independent review. The firm they hired got flagged for cutting corners." I stirred my coffee and kept my eyes on the paper. "So who reviews it?" "Has to be somebody the board trusts, somebody with a clean name." They moved on to football. I sat very still. Smith Group. The name caught like a burr. Daniel's people. The wealthy ones. The family that had decided I wasn't fit to sit in their banquet hall. I told myself it was coincidence. Rich families own a dozen companies. Half the developments in 3 counties probably had a Smith somewhere on the paperwork. It didn't have to mean anything. But that unopened county letter was still on my desk. The one I'd been too busy, or maybe too heartsore, to open. And something cold turned over in my chest. I drove back to the office faster than I should have. Raina had the mail stacked, county letterhead on top, right where it had sat for 2 days. I picked it up, I held it, and then I set it back down. I don't know why. Maybe part of me already sensed what was inside and wasn't ready. Maybe a man can only handle one heartbreak at a time, and that week my heart was full. I had a retaining wall to inspect. The letter could wait one more day. It waited, and the name Smith sat quiet on my desk while my pride and my patience got tested all at once. The night before I'd promised Emily my answer, I sat down and wrote her a text. I rewrote it 4 times. I'm no good with words on a screen. I wanted to say everything, and I wanted to say nothing that would weigh on her. In the end, I kept it simple. Emily, I love you more than anything I've ever built. If staying home makes your day easier, I'll stay home. My door is always open, and my pride in you never changes. Go be happy. Dad. I read it once and hit send before I could second guess it. She replied within a minute, just 3 words. I love you. Then, a moment later, I'm so sorry. I set the phone face down on the table. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. It cut deeper than anything had since Carol. To be told by your own child that your presence is a liability, that the hands that fed and raised her are something to hide, that's a particular kind of ache. It sits behind the breastbone and doesn't move. But I meant what I told Maggie. I wasn't going to make Emily fight a war on the happiest day of her life. If the price of her peace was my absence, I'd pay it. A father pays a lot of prices his children never see. So I decided I'd stay home. I'd be gracious. I'd wish them well and mean it. I thought that was the end of the story. A quiet man steps aside, swallows his pride, and life goes on. It wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning. Because 3 days later, I finally opened that county letter, and the name printed inside it changed everything. I wasn't at the rehearsal dinner, but Maggie was. Emily had begged her to come, and Maggie went mostly to keep an eye on things. She told me everything afterward, sitting on my kitchen table with her arms crossed tight. The dinner was at the country club. Crystal, white linen, a string quartet. Vivien Smith ran the room like a queen working a court. She stood up to give a little toast, Maggie said. Welcomed Emily to the family. And she says, Emily comes from simple, hard-working people. We just adore that about her. That doesn't sound so bad. It was the way she said it, Tom, like Emily was a rescue dog they'd taken in. Then someone at the table asked about the bride's father. Was he coming tomorrow? Maggie said the whole table went quiet, waiting. Vivien smiled. Emily's father is a working man, very busy with his trade. He won't be able to join us. A trade, Maggie repeated to me, her voice flat with fury. She made you sound like a man who couldn't get the day off. Let her. I wanted to stand up and tell that whole gilded table what you are. And what good would that have done? Maggie's eyes flashed. It would have felt good. For about 10 seconds. Then it would have made Emily the girl whose aunt caused a scene. She knew I was right, and it made her angrier. She gripped her coffee mug like she wanted to throw it. There's something else, Maggie said. Daniel, the groom. When his mother said that about you, he frowned, like it didn't sit right with him. I filed that away. A frown isn't much. But sometimes a frown is the first crack in a wall. I'd learned soon enough how wide that crack would open. Emily called me the morning after the rehearsal dinner. She didn't say why. She just wanted to hear my voice, I think. How was the dinner? I asked. Fine. A pause. It was fine. I let the silence breathe. She filled it the way she does. Dad, these people are strange. The way they talk about everyone. Last night Vivien was going on about a caterer who came from nothing, like it was a flaw. Some folks measure worth in dollars. It's not just that, Emily's voice dropped. She called her cleaning lady practically family. Then she complained the woman wanted a day off. For her son's funeral. I didn't say anything. I let her hear what she was telling me. I keep thinking, Emily said slowly, about how she talks about people who work with their hands. And then I think about you. Don't tie yourself in knots, honey. It's your wedding. That's the thing, Dad. I asked you not to come because of how she'd see you, but I'm starting to wonder if her seeing you matters at all. Something loosened in my chest. Not relief, exactly. The first sign of my daughter waking up. Daniel doesn't think like them, she added quickly. He asked me last night why you weren't there. I didn't have a good answer. What did you tell him? I told him the truth, that his mother didn't want you there. She breathed out. He got quiet. Then he said, that's not her call to make. I sat with that. The groom had a spine after all. He wants to meet you, Emily said. Before the wedding. Just him. Then send him over, I said. I'll put coffee on. I didn't know it yet, but Daniel was about to ask me a question that would change his family forever. Daniel Smith came to my house on a Thursday evening. He was nervous. I'll give him credit for coming anyway. He was tall, well-dressed, the kind of polish that money buys. But he shook my hand firm and looked me in the eye, and that told me more than the watch on his wrist. "Mr. Thatcher," he said, "thank you for seeing me. I know things have been handled badly. Sit down, son. Coffee?" We sat at the kitchen table. He looked around the house. Modest, clean, photos of Emily on every wall. "Emily talks about you all the time," he said. "She says you raised her alone, that you built things." I did. I do. "What kind of things?" So I told him a little. Buildings, retaining walls, roads. He nodded politely, the way people do when they're being polite. Then I mentioned the Halloran Bridge. Daniel set his cup down. "Wait, the bridge on the north end? The big steel one?" "That's the one." "You didn't just work on it. You built it?" "Designed it, built it, 22 years ago." He stared at me. Something shifted behind his eyes. "My father," Daniel said slowly, "talks about that bridge. He uses it in pitches. He says it's why people trust building in this county. He calls it the gold standard for regional infrastructure." "Does he?" "He's never known who built it." Daniel sat back. "Mr. Thatcher, my father has spent 2 years trying to get a development approved on the river. It's stalled. He talks about needing the right engineer to sign off, somebody the county respects." He stopped. The color drained from his face. Somebody with a clean name. I felt the two halves of the story slide toward each other. I kept my face still. "Small world," I said. But it wasn't small. It was about to get very, very tight. I didn't see this part myself. I pieced it together later, from Daniel and from things that surfaced afterward. But it matters, so I'll tell it. Richard Smith was a man under pressure. The Riverside development was the biggest thing his company had ever attempted. 3 towers, retail, a marina. He'd borrowed heavily against it. He'd told investors it was a sure thing. He'd staked his name on it, and it was frozen. The county board wouldn't grant final approval without an independent structural review. The firm Richard first hired had been flagged on another project for falsifying load reports. Now, every signature that firm had touched was suspect. The board wanted a fresh review from someone they trusted completely. That weekend, Richard was in his study late, going over numbers that didn't add up. Daniel told me his father had aged 5 years and 2 months. The interest alone was bleeding him. If approval didn't come by the end of the quarter, the whole thing could collapse and take a good part of the family fortune with it. Vivien found him at his desk and asked why he wouldn't come to bed. "Because if this falls through," Richard said, "the wedding's the least of our problems." He wasn't a cartoon villain, this man. He was a frightened person who'd built his life on appearances and was watching the foundation crack. That fear was about to make him do something cruel, and then, later, something close to brave. What Richard didn't have was a name. The county had a short list of engineers qualified and trusted enough to sign off on a structure that size. There were only 2 in the region. One had just retired to Florida. The other had built the Halloran Bridge. Richard didn't know that yet. He'd find out the worst possible way. There was a small gathering a few days before the wedding, a garden luncheon for both families to get acquainted. Emily wanted me there. I declined, gently, but Maggie went, and so did a handful of my side. Vivien was in her element. White tent, champagne, a harpist. Maggie told me it started civil enough. Then Vivien found her audience. "We're just thrilled," Vivien announced to a cluster of her friends, loud enough for Emily's side to hear. Of course, weddings can be such a clash of worlds. Emily's people are wonderfully unpretentious. A few polite laughs. "Honestly," Vivien went on, swirling her glass, "it's probably for the best her father couldn't make it. The poor man would have been so out of his depth here. All these introductions. He wouldn't know a soul." Maggie said the tent went quiet on our side. And then my sister, God bless her, set down her champagne and spoke. "Out of his depth?" Maggie said. Her voice carried. "My brother built half the things in this county that you people drive over and live in." Vivien's smile froze. "I'm sure he's very handy." "Handy?" Maggie laughed, sharp. "Lady, you have no idea who you're talking about." The friends shifted uncomfortably. Emily's cheeks burned red. Vivien recovered with a tinkling laugh. How charming. Such family loyalty. She turned away, dismissing the whole thing. Maggie wanted to say more. Emily caught her eye and gave the smallest shake of her head, so Maggie stopped, for Emily's sake. She told me about it that night, still shaking. I almost told her, Tom. I almost told the whole tent. I'm glad you didn't. Why? She deserves it. Because the truth lands harder when it arrives on its own. And it's coming. I opened the letter today. I'd finally opened the county letter that morning, before Maggie's call. I read it twice at my desk, slow, the way I read everything that matters. The county board was formally requesting that Thatcher Structural conduct the independent review for a major riverside development. They'd chosen me specifically. My reputation, the letter said, and my history with regional infrastructure made me the board's first choice. My signature would carry the approval. Then I reached the developer's name. Smith Group, Daniel's family, Vivien's husband, the people who decided I wasn't fit to sit in a banquet hall. The whole thing assembled itself in front of me, clean and complete. The development that would save or sink Richard Smith. The signature he desperately needed. And the only man the county would accept to provide it was the same man his wife had called an embarrassment. The grandfather of his future grandchildren. The father he'd told to stay home. I set the coffee cup down very slowly. I'm not a man who believes much in fate. I believe in load and tension, cause and effect. But I sat there a long while with that letter, and I'll admit something in me went quiet and still. The Smiths needed me. They needed me more than they'd needed anything in years, and they had no idea the man they needed was the one they'd thrown away. I could have called Emily that minute. I could have called Maggie. I didn't, because the first thought that rose in me wasn't triumph. It was a question. What kind of man was I going to be now that I held this? The answer to that question would matter more than the development, more than the wedding, more than any of it. I sat with that letter for the rest of the day. I didn't sleep much that night. A smaller man would have seen a weapon. I'll be honest, the thought crossed my mind. I could fail their review. I could find a dozen reasons to delay, to flag, to bury Richard Smith in conditions and revisions until his loans crushed him. I could make Vivien watch her gilded world come apart over a signature she'd insulted out of existence. It would have been easy. It would have been deserved, some would say. I didn't do it. I want to be clear about why, because it's the center of everything that follows. The Halloran Bridge has held for 22 years because I never once let anything but the truth into a report. Not a friendship, not a grudge, not a deadline. Steel doesn't care how you feel. A bridge holds or it fails on the numbers alone. The day I let a personal feeling into my professional judgment is the day I become a man who can't be trusted, and then everything I've built means nothing. So I made a decision at my kitchen table, alone, with nobody watching. I would do the review. Honestly. Completely. If the towers were sound, I'd say so. If they had problems, I'd say that too, no matter who had helped or hurt. I would not use my work to punish anyone. That was a line I would not cross, no matter what the Smiths had done to me. I called Raina in the morning and told her to schedule the site inspection. You sure about this one, boss? She asked. She knew the name. Small town. I'm sure, I said. We do it right, same as always. Then I drove out to walk the river site, where the rest of this was waiting to happen. While I walked the river site, Emily was losing herself. She called me that week, and I could hear it in her voice. The wedding had stopped being hers. Vivien changed the flowers, she said. I picked white roses. She decided on orchids. She said roses are common. It's one flower, honey. It's not just the flowers, Dad. It's everything. The menu, the music, the seating, the dress alterations. Every time I say what I want, she says, "Trust me, dear. I know what works for our kind of event." And Daniel? He tries, but it's her money paying for it, and she never lets anyone forget that. I listened. I've learned that's most of what a father can do for a grown daughter. Listen and wait for the moment she asks the real question. It came. Dad, can I tell you something awful? Always. I've started disappearing at my own wedding, like I'm a guest at someone else's party, her voice cracked. And then I realized, that's exactly what I did to you. I let her erase me the same way I let her erase you. I closed my eyes. There it was, my girl, finding her way back. You see it now, I said softly. I see it. I just don't know how to stop it. She steamrolls everyone. You stop it by deciding there's a line she doesn't cross, and then you hold the line. Calm. No yelling. You just don't move. What if she pushes? People like Vivien push until they hit something solid. Then they're amazed there was something solid all along. Emily went quiet. Then, were you ever scared of people like her? No, I said, because I never needed their approval to know my own worth. And neither do you. You just forgot. I heard her breathe. The waking up was almost complete. Daniel confronted his mother 2 days before the wedding. Emily was there. She told me every word. It started over the seating chart. Vivien had placed Emily's family at a table near the kitchen doors. Daniel noticed. Mom, why is Emily's side back here? It's a lovely table, darling. It's by the service entrance. Vivien waved a hand. These things have a flow, trust me. Daniel didn't let it go. Where's Emily's father seated? A silence. Her father isn't attending, Vivien said. We discussed this. No, Daniel said. You decided this. There's a difference. Vivien's voice cooled. Daniel, that man is a manual laborer. He drives a truck older than you. Our guests include a state senator and the Hartwells. I will not have your wedding turned into a spectacle because some tradesman feels left out. That tradesman, Daniel said, built the Halloran Bridge. Emily said the room went still. Vivien blinked. I'm sure he poured some concrete on it. He designed it. He's the reason this county trusts anyone to build anything. Half the firms in the state call him for advice. Daniel's voice rose. And you sat him at no table at all. Vivien recovered, the way she always did. Reputation. A laborer doesn't have a reputation, Daniel. He has a job. That single sentence told me everything about the woman. It wasn't ignorance. It was a world view. To Vivien, a person's value was their bank balance and nothing more. Emily said she nearly spoke up then, but Daniel held up a hand. You're wrong, Mother, he said quietly, and I think you're about to find out exactly how wrong. He didn't know about the county letter. He just believed in me on principle. He had no idea his father was, at that very moment, scheduling a meeting with the engineer who would decide his family's future. The two halves of this story were about to touch. Here's how it lined up. Richard Smith's assistant called my office on Friday. The Smith Group wanted to schedule the review meeting for Monday morning. Raina booked it. She put it on my calendar under Smith Group, Riverside Review. Richard didn't make that call himself. He didn't know my name meant anything. To him, I was just the county's engineer, a box to be checked, a signature to be obtained. He'd been told the board's chosen reviewer would meet with him to begin the process. He was relieved. After 2 years of delays, someone was finally going to move his project forward. That same Friday evening, the wedding was the next day. Vivien was doing final checks at the country club. The seating chart, the one without a place for me, sat finished on a side table in Richard's home study, right beside the project folder he'd been losing sleep over. 2 documents, 1 desk, the bride's family list and the engineering review file, both with the same surname waiting inside them, though no one had yet set them side by side. Daniel knew who I was, but not about the review. Richard knew about the review, but not who I was. Vivien knew nothing and assumed she knew everything. And I knew all of it, and had decided to say nothing and let the truth arrive on its own schedule. I went to bed that Friday night a calm man. Tomorrow my daughter would marry. Monday I'd meet the man who'd called me an embarrassment, across a conference table where he needed my name on a page. The next morning, Richard Smith sat down at his desk with his coffee and opened the project folder to prepare for Monday. And there, on the cover sheet, he read the name of the reviewer. Let me pause here for a moment. If you've ever been told by your own family that you weren't good enough to be seen, you know the quiet I carried in my chest through those weeks. I'm not telling this to complain. I'm telling it because what happened next taught me that dignity doesn't need anyone's permission. If this story is reaching you, hit that like button so it can find other fathers, other mothers who felt invisible. Then stay with me, because the moment Richard Smith realized he'd thrown away the wrong man is coming now. Richard Smith read the name on the cover sheet. Thatcher Structural. Thomas Thatcher, Principal Engineer. Daniel told me his father sat very still for a moment. The name meant nothing at first. Then something tugged at him. He'd heard Thatcher recently. Where? He called Daniel into the study. Thatcher, Richard said. Why do I know that name? Daniel looked at the folder. He saw the cover sheet. And Emily told me later that her fiancé started to laugh, a stunned, disbelieving laugh. Dad, Daniel said. That's Emily's father. The color left Richard's face. Daniel said he watched his father go gray. What do you mean, Emily's father? Thomas Thatcher, the man Mom told to stay home from the wedding. The tradesman. Daniel's voice was hard. He built the Halloran Bridge, Dad. He's the engineer the county trusts. He's the man who's holding your entire development in his hands right now." Richard stood up. He looked at the seating chart on the side table, the one with no place for me. He looked at the project folder with my name on it, the two documents he'd never set side by side. "Tell me you're joking," he said. "I wish I were." Richard sat back down, slowly. He was a man who'd spent 2 years and most of his fortune trying to get one signature, and he'd just learned that the signature belonged to the man his wife had publicly humiliated, the man he'd let her humiliate. "Vivien," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was the sound of a man realizing what his pride had cost. Daniel said his father picked up the phone, then set it down, picked it up again. He didn't know whether to call me, call Vivien, or call his lawyer. He'd insulted the one man he could not afford to insult. The wedding was that afternoon. Richard had hours, not days, to figure out what to do. He understood his position completely now. It wasn't only the signature. It was worse than that. The whole pitch of his Riverside development rested on trust. He'd sold investors in the county on quality, on the gold standard of regional infrastructure. And the man who set that standard, the man whose bridge he'd bragged about for years, was the father his family had thrown away. If word got out, and in a small town, word always gets out, that Richard Smith had publicly humiliated the very engineer the county revered, his reputation wouldn't just take a hit, it would shatter. Who trusts a developer who insults the best builder in the region over a country club seating chart? And the review itself. Richard had assumed it would be a formality. Now he understood it was in the hands of a man with every reason to bury him, and no obligation not to. He didn't yet know what kind of man I was. He only knew what his family had done to me. So he assumed I'd do to him what he would have done in my place. Daniel said his father paced the study for an hour. Then he made a decision. He'd go to the wedding, find a moment, and try to make it right before the review meeting on Monday. He'd apologize. He'd offer whatever it took. What Richard didn't understand, what people like the Smiths never understand until it's too late, is that some things can't be bought back. An insult once given can be forgiven, but it can't be ungiven. And the respect he suddenly, desperately wanted from me was the one thing his money had no power over. He drove to the wedding with a speech rehearsed. He never got to give it the way he planned. Here's the thing the Smiths didn't know. I went to the wedding, not to the ceremony. I had promised Emily I'd stay home, and I kept my word for the vows. But that morning, Emily had called me, crying, and asked me to come to the reception. She said she'd been wrong, that she wanted her father there, that she didn't care what Vivien thought anymore. So I put on the charcoal suit, the one from her nursing graduation, and I drove to the country club as the reception was beginning. I was standing near the garden entrance when Richard Smith found me. He knew my face from the photos at Emily's place, I suppose, or Daniel pointed me out. He came across the lawn fast, then slowed, then stopped a few feet away. A powerful man, suddenly unsure. "Mr. Thatcher," he said, "I'm Richard Smith, Daniel's father. I know who you are." He swallowed. "I owe you an apology, a real one. What my wife did, what I allowed, it was wrong. I didn't know who you... You didn't know I was useful to you," I said. Calm, not cruel. "That's different from knowing you were wrong." He flinched. "Fair. I got the county letter," I said. "I know about your development. I know you need my signature." Richard's jaw tightened. He was bracing for the blow he'd have delivered himself. "My review will be honest," I told him. "If your towers are sound, I'll approve them. If they're not, I'll say so. My judgment isn't for sale, and it isn't for revenge. It never has been." Richard stared at me. He hadn't expected that. "Your review doesn't depend on whether I was invited to a wedding," I said, "and that invitation was never something you could buy back. Those are two separate things. Keep them separate." The reveal happened in front of everyone. I didn't plan it that way. It just happened, the way truth does when it's finally let loose. Daniel saw me talking to his father and came over with Emily. My daughter saw me in my gray suit and ran the last few steps and threw her arms around me. The guests noticed. People always notice a bride crying on a stranger's shoulder. Vivien crossed the lawn, smiling her hostess smile, ready to manage the situation. "And who is this?" she said brightly, not recognizing me. The garden went quiet around us. The state senator, the Hartwells, Vivien's whole gilded audience turning to look. Daniel spoke before I could, loud and clear. "Mother, this is Thomas Thatcher, Emily's father." He paused. "The engineer who built the Halloran Bridge, The man the county chose to review Dad's development. The man whose signature decides whether our family keeps its fortune. Vivien's smile cracked and fell off her face. A man in the crowd, silver-haired, stepped forward. Thomas Thatcher, of Thatcher Structural? He put out his hand. George Hartwell, my firm has tried to hire you for 15 years. It's an honor, sir. The guests murmured. The state senator nodded toward me with respect. The woman Vivien had called practically family, her own cousin, looked at her with something like disgust. Vivien stood frozen in the middle of her perfect party, every important person in the garden now watching her realize what she'd done. I had no idea, she managed. That's the problem, I said quietly. You decided my worth without knowing the first thing about me. You'll find most people are worth more than their hands look. Emily took my arm, Daniel stood beside me, and Vivien Smith, queen of the country club, had nothing left to say. Emily didn't let go of my arm. She turned, with everyone watching, and she spoke loud enough to carry. I need to say something. The garden hushed. This is my father, Emily said. Thomas Thatcher. He raised me alone after my mom died. He worked with his hands so I could go to school. Everything good in me came from him. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. A few weeks ago, I let someone convince me he'd embarrass me. I asked my own father to stay home for my wedding. Tears ran down her face. That's the most shameful thing I've ever done. Not him, me. The guests were silent. Vivien had gone pale and small. I was so afraid of not fitting into this world that I almost threw away the best person in mine. Emily looked at me. Dad, I'm sorry. You belong here more than anyone. Will you come in? I'm not a man who cries easy. I came close right there. There's nowhere I'd rather be, I said. Daniel stepped up beside her. Mr. Thatcher, there's a seat at the head table, right where it should have been all along. He glanced at his mother. I'll fix the chart myself. Emily hugged me again, and this time the whole garden saw a daughter choose her father, out loud, in front of the people who told her not to. I caught Maggie's eye across the lawn. She was grinning through tears and mouthing something I won't repeat in polite company. Vivien tried to step toward us. Emily, dear, of course your father is welcome. I know he is, Emily said, not unkind but final. I'm telling you, not asking you. And just like that, the power in that garden shifted, quietly, completely, the way real things do. The fallout for Vivien was quiet and complete. Nobody screamed at her. Nobody had to. The damage was done in the looks people gave her for the rest of that reception, and in the weeks after. Small towns talk. By the next week, half the county knew the story. Vivien Smith had publicly humiliated Thomas Thatcher, the man who built the Halloran Bridge, over a seating chart. The man the Hartwells had chased for 15 years. The man the county trusted above anyone. The story made Vivien look exactly like what she was. Not powerful, just cruel and small. George Hartwell's wife had been one of Vivien's closest social connections. That friendship cooled to nothing within a month. 2 charity boards Vivien sat on suddenly had full rosters when her term came up for renewal. The invitations to the right parties slowed, then stopped. She wasn't ruined. She kept her house and her money and her name. But the thing she traded my dignity for, her standing in the only world she valued, sprang a leak she couldn't patch. I take no pleasure in telling you this. I want to be honest about that. I didn't lift a finger to make any of it happen. I never said a word against her to anyone. The fallout was simply the natural weight of what she'd done, finally landing where it belonged. That's the thing people like Vivien never understand. You don't have to punish them. You just have to stop protecting them from the consequences of their own behavior. Step out of the way, and the world does the rest. Emily asked me once if I felt sorry for her. A little, I said, and I meant it. It's a sad way to live, measuring everyone by their wallet. She'd built her whole self on it. Now she was watching it crack. Richard Smith came to my office the Monday after the wedding, like we'd scheduled, for the review meeting. He sat across my desk, and before we opened a single folder, he said his piece. I want to apologize again, properly, not because I need your signature, because I was wrong, and a man should say so. I waited. I let fear run me, Richard said. This development is everything I've got. I was so scared of losing it that I stopped seeing people as people, including you, including, frankly, my son's bride. He looked at his hands. I built my whole life on what things look like. I'm starting to think I built it on sand. It was an honest thing to say. I respected it. I accept your apology, I told him. But I'll say this once. Respect that only shows up when you need something isn't respect. It's calculation. If you mean it, you'll treat the next tradesman the same way you'd treat me, the one whose name you don't know. Richard nodded slowly. That's fair. Now, I said, opening the project folder, let's talk about your towers, because this is the part where my personal feelings stop mattering entirely. And we got to work. I'll say this for Richard. He didn't try to charm me or pressure me. He answered my questions straight. When I asked hard ones, he didn't dodge. Somewhere under all that fear and appearance, there was a real man who'd once known how to build something honestly. I think he'd forgotten. I think this whole mess reminded him. He wasn't his wife. By the end of that meeting, I understood the difference. Vivien had insulted me out of conviction. Richard had allowed it out of fear. Those aren't the same sin, and they don't earn the same ending. The review took 3 weeks. I did it the way I do everything. Completely. I walked the site a dozen times. I checked the soil reports, the load calculations, the steel specifications. I went over the work of the firm that had cut corners, and I found exactly why the county hadn't trusted it. Here's the honest truth, and it's the part that proves I meant what I said. The towers had problems. Real ones. The original firm had underspecified the foundation for the riverside soil, which shifts more than dry ground. Built as designed, the third tower would have had settlement issues within 15 years. Not a collapse, but cracks, costly repairs, maybe worse down the line. I could have approved it anyway. Richard would never have known the difference, and neither would the county, not for years. Approving it fast would have made me his hero. I didn't. I wrote it up exactly as I found it. The foundation needed redesign. The third tower needed deeper pilings. I specified what would make it sound, and I made my approval conditional on those fixes. It cost Richard money and time. Several $100,000 and another 2 months. He could have been angry. A lesser man would have accused me of revenge. Instead, when I walked him through the findings, he went quiet, then said, "If we'd built it the other way, and it failed, people could have gotten hurt," I said. Eventually, he nodded. "Then thank you, for not just telling me what I wanted to hear." That's when I knew Richard Smith was going to be all right. The review that could have buried him, I used to protect him and everyone who'd ever live or work in those towers. Honestly. The way I'd build for anyone. That's the only kind of power I've ever wanted. The kind you can look at in the mirror. Emily set her own boundary with Vivien a month after the wedding. She told me about it, calm and proud. The two of them were having coffee, a peace meeting Daniel had arranged. Vivien, true to form, tried to smooth it all over without ever quite apologizing. "I think we all got a little carried away with the wedding stress," Vivien said. "Water under the bridge." Emily set down her cup. "No, Vivien. I want to be clear about something, calmly, one time." Vivien's smile tightened. "You tried to make me ashamed of my father," Emily said. "The best man I know. You used my fear against me. I let you, and that's on me. But it ends here." "Emily, dear, my father will sit at the head of every family table from now on. He'll hold my children when I have them. He'll be at every holiday." Emily's voice was even, no anger in it. "That's not up for discussion. It's not something you get a vote on." Vivien opened her mouth. "I'm not asking you to like it," Emily went on. "I'm telling you how it's going to be. You can be part of this family with grace, or you can be part of it from a distance. Your choice. But my father's place is settled." Emily told me Vivien didn't have a response. For maybe the first time in her life, she'd hit something solid and couldn't push past it. "I held the line, Dad," Emily told me after. "Calm, no yelling, just like you said." "How'd it feel?" She thought about it. "Like getting myself back." I've never been prouder of her. Not at her graduation, not at her wedding. That moment. My daughter standing firm and gentle at the same time. That was the thing I'd spent her whole life trying to teach her, finally taking root. I missed the ceremony. I'll always carry that small regret. But I got the reception, and I got something better than I dared hope for. About an hour into the party, Daniel tapped a glass and asked for quiet. He looked at Emily, then at me. "We didn't get to do the father-daughter dance," he said, "because of a mistake my family made. I'd like to fix that now, if Mr. Thatcher will allow it." The band started something slow. Emily came and took my hand, my rough hand in her soft one. We danced. I'm a terrible dancer. I stepped on her foot twice and she laughed, that real laugh I've loved since she was small. The whole garden watched and I didn't care who saw. Let them see a working man dance with his girl. Halfway through, Emily put her head on my shoulder. "You almost weren't here," she whispered. "But I am, because you forgave me before I even deserved it. That's what a father does, honey." When the dance ended, people clapped. George Hartwell clapped loudest. Even Richard, standing by the bar, raised his glass to me. Vivien wasn't in sight. I heard later she'd stepped inside. The world the Smiths had built, all that crystal and money and careful appearance, hadn't been able to keep one stubborn truth out. A father belongs at his daughter's wedding. No amount of wealth gets to rewrite that. I sat at the head table that night, right where Daniel had set my place. The senator shook my hand. The Hartwells asked about the bridge. Strangers treated me like I mattered, because for the first time in that world, the truth of who I was had walked in the front door. But the part I remember most wasn't any of them. It was the dance. People ask me sometimes if I feel vindicated, like I won something. I don't think of it that way. I never needed Vivien Smith to know I built the Halloran Bridge. The bridge knows. It stands there every day, holding 10,000 cars, not caring who admires the man who built it. That's always been enough for me. Your worth isn't a thing other people hand you. It's a thing you carry, whether they see it or not. What changed wasn't my sense of myself. That never wavered. Not even when my own daughter asked me to stay home. What changed was Emily. She'd nearly let other people's eyes become her mirror. And she found her way back to a truer one. That's the prize. Not Vivien's downfall. Not the senator shaking my hand. Watching my girl learn that she doesn't have to shrink for anyone. That she can be kind and still be unmovable. That's worth more than every signature I've ever put on a page. I didn't win by tearing anyone down. I want you to hear that clearly. I never raised my voice. I never used my position to hurt Richard, even when I could have, even when some would say he had it coming. I just refused to let anyone make me smaller than I am. That's the whole secret, if there is one. You don't beat people like the Smiths by becoming like them. You beat them by staying exactly who you are, while they reveal exactly who they are. I won by refusing to let anyone hand me a smaller version of myself. That's a victory nobody can take back, because it never depended on them in the first place. Emily understands that now. Someday she'll teach it to her own children, and I'll be there at the head of the table when she does. A year later, on a clear autumn morning, I stood on the Halloran Bridge with Emily and Daniel. We'd walked out to the overlook, the three of us, the way families do on a good day with nowhere to be. The river ran high and bright below us. Cars hummed past on the 4 lanes I'd laid down 23 years before. Emily was expecting now. She told me on that bridge, her hand on her belly, Daniel grinning beside her. "We wanted to tell you here," she said, "where you built something that lasts." I put my rough hand over hers, the same hand Vivien Smith had looked at and seen a laborer, the same hand that had held Carol's at the end and braided a 12-year-old's hair and signed the report that would make Richard's Towers safe for the people who'd live in them. "A bridge doesn't care who built it," I said. "It just needs to be built right. Then it holds. For everybody. For a long time." Emily leaned against me. Daniel stood on my other side. Below us the water moved, patient and sure. I thought about all of it. The phone call that asked me to disappear. The quiet weeks I carried that ache. The letter on my desk. The garden where the truth finally walked in. I could have become bitter. I could have used my power to break people. I didn't. I built. I held. I stayed who I was. And here, on the thing I'd made with my own hands, my daughter was telling me a new life was coming. A life that would cross this bridge someday, never knowing or needing to know who built it. That's enough for me. It always was. A bridge built right doesn't need anyone's permission to hold. Neither does a man. If you stayed with me all the way here, maybe someone once told you that you weren't good enough to be seen too. I want you to know this. Your worth was never in the hands of the people who tried to leave you out. Leave me a comment and tell me, have you ever held a boundary that made you proud? If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and watch the next one linked in the description. Another story about finding your dignity when no one believes in you.